Okay, super duper. So most folks here know who I am, but what I want to do is just kind of set the frame here. So I'm Christian Scott here at Go Vanguard. I'm the Chief Operating Officer, Chief Information Security Officer. I don't start from a place of being an executive first or being a career executive, right? I start from matriculating all the way from help desk and technology services and building data centers, that kind of fun stuff, right? Then going through all the fun processes of management and all that fun jazz, right? So I do come originally from a background of doing a lot of healthcare and information technology type of stuff, right? So previous to working here at Go Vanguard, I worked at the second largest multi-specialty medical practice in upstate New York that did everything from pediatrics to geriatrics and all that in between. And I used to administrate things like PAC systems. So that's what like you do your X-ray images and MRIs and all that kind of stuff. And things like EMRs, electronic medical record environments, right? So when you go to the doctor and your patient charts, all that kind of stuff, right? I come from a very traditional network infrastructure, compute infrastructure environment. And then after moving on from that into Go Vanguard for many, many years was an IT managed services provider, right? And that's where we then, I refreshed my knowledge to understanding cloud infrastructure quite well, newer concepts in regards to DevOps and infrastructure as code, security and software development lifecycle, that kind of stuff. I have some previous experience and knowledge in software development from back in the day when I was a bit younger. And then also when I did a lot of work for Allscripts, and which is a large EMR ambulatory company, right? So that's kind of just a general framing in reference for you. Over my career, I have had the opportunity of hiring a lot of individuals. I've had the opportunity of, unfortunately, having to terminate a lot of individuals. I've had the opportunity of interviewing probably thousands of people at this point over my career. And I've also had the opportunity of being on the other side of the table, being in a lot of your guys' shoes, right? Of being interviewed and it being tough. So first and foremost, anytime anyone has to do any type of interview, I know that that process can be very challenging for the self-esteem, sometimes can be degrading, and that employers can sometimes also treat people like shit. So every time when like Blake and myself interview candidates, we always follow up to people and let them know like, hey, sorry, you're not a good fit for this position. Here's why. Let me give you some tips. Let me best set you up for success for the future and provide you feedback, right? Try to treat human beings like human beings, right? Unfortunately, as you guys know, that's not how society usually works, unfortunately, especially when it comes to hiring. So what we wanted to do here was set everyone up best for success and give you guys some tips and tricks, right? So that as you guys are building your pen testing skills, your cybersecurity skills, information security skills, and all that kind of stuff, as you guys are either looking for a new foot in the door or you're looking for a new position at a new place, right? You can leverage some of these tips and tricks, right, of what I have seen going through these experiences, right? So it makes the process a little bit easier for you guys, right? Hopefully saves you a little bit of time and energy and bullshit and that kind of stuff. Cool beans? Okay, so first and foremost, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to just show a couple of things when it comes to tips and tricks and whatnot. And give me one sec here. It's a little unstructured. So I do want to make sure I don't share more than I should. So I'm just going to start my screen a little bit better. And Microsoft Teams is looking at me like it's dead. There we go. Fantastic. We'll share out this page, by the way, at the end of this at the end of this training session here. It'll be a public page that you guys can all access and look at that kind of stuff. Okay. So we recently had an experience where we were interviewing a lot of folks for a web app pen tester position that we had open, right? Actually, the gentleman that we hired, Dennis Carlson, he's here today. Fantastic candidate, right? And in a lot of ways, checked a lot of good quote unquote check boxes, right? Now, again, there's always the opportunity for people to improve and that kind of stuff, but we are very, very impressed with our experience interfacing with him. Some of the things that really impress me when I am looking to hire people is when somebody is not just throwing out a billion spam messages of a position that they're obviously not qualified for or is not in their domain. So just going to go right up to the top here of general mistakes. And Travis, Travis Keon, if you guys could capture just a couple of these. So first and foremost, don't apply for positions that you are obviously not qualified for. because it very, very much just annoys whoever has to go through that pool of candidates, right? They're getting hundreds, not of sometimes in certain instances, thousands of applicants, right? When you get a bunch of garbage applicants, right? What does is it makes the person on the other side, the HR manager, right, more cynical, right, and willing to treat people more transactionally rather than human beings, right? So we want to try to get people out of that loop in that process, right? So while a lot of people try to take a shotgun approach to things, shotgun approach doesn't work that well. I know I tried it a lot over my career, right? It just is very, very frustrating for people, right? So when you're applying for positions, usually try to, again, apply for a position that's well curated for what you're looking for. One of the things actually I put right at the top here, by the way, is not researching the industry and the various roles within information security, by the way. So when you're applying for jobs, you're going to really want to think about what are you trying to focus on? What do you want out of your career path, right? Where are you looking to go? Here's just a little like document I have for you guys here. I did not create this, right? This is already created. I don't know why. There we go. We can expand down the vertical view there just a little bit more. Okay. The domain of cybersecurity is extremely wide, right? Now, notice I mentioned, by the way, both information security and cybersecurity, because you have information security, and then within that is a smaller domain of cybersecurity, because information doesn't just have to be in cyber form, it could be in physical form, right? So that's where you get into like even physical pen testing, that kind of stuff, like lockpicking and whatnot, right? It's technically not as much cybersecurity, not unless you're doing drop devices, but we can talk about that more in the future. But most people are really interested in cybersecurity, right, as a particular niche area, right? It's still really, really massive, right? A lot of people, when they start in cybersecurity, they're either moving from some type of blue team type of role in technology. So they were a network engineer, they were a software developer, they were a help desk person, that kind of stuff, right? And usually what they'll do is they'll start to move into some type of security operations role, because network people have to do some level of network security things like setting up access list controls and setting up WAF rules, web application firewall rules, and that kind of stuff. So they'll get familiar with a lot of security concepts, or a cyber administrator being familiar with security hardening practices, that kind of stuff, right? So it would make a lot of sense, right, for someone who already has a technical engineering background to some degree or another to start in the security operations side of things, right? Not a problem at all, right? What I also see is a lot of people who are kind of just generally new to cybersecurity as almost a thing. It's kind of like cool to everybody. Everyone wants to do pen testing, right? Everyone and their grandma wants to do pen testing. Pen testing is absolutely fantastic and really awesome, and I am biased to it as well, right? And biggest note I'm going to know, though, is that if you're doing pen testing, you'll have to just do a little bit more beyond the books, right? Beyond the initial labs, the HackerOne exercises, that kind of stuff, right? The hack the box stuff and all that. Because at the end of the day, and just kind of going back up to other general mistakes here, one of the things that I find people not doing is focusing on critical thinking skills, asking why and trying to understand why, right? One of the fantastic interns who's recently joined us from the Army Career Skills Program is Kiana Whitney here with us, right? And when she was sitting down with Travis and Dane from our team, and they were describing social engineering to her and our social engineering processes as we do in a social engineering engagement against one of our typical customers, right? She asked a lot of good critical whys, right? Of like, okay, but why would you approach it that way? What are the considerations for this, right? And so a lot of those good frequently asked questions, right, means that someone's actually connecting all the dots, right? And getting to behind what the customer actually wants. At the end of the day, customers do not want a list of vulnerabilities and weaknesses. What they want is to understand their security posture and have some type of roadmap to improving it, right? So that also gets to another important point, which is as people are focusing on cybersecurity, to not neglect their speaking and writing skills, right? At the end of the day, you can be the most intelligent cybersecurity engineer on the planet, but if you cannot practically communicate what the takeaways are or how to actually action on remediating a particular risk or vulnerability, you're going to have a challenging time of affecting change within an organization, right? So at the end of the day, one of the things that I'm going to just generally note for folks is that I would always recommend asking yourself as a general exercise, if I was explaining this vulnerability or weakness right now to an executive like a CEO who had no understanding of cybersecurity, right? How can I relate that to their business function? And one of the things that's challenging with CEOs and chief operating officers is almost everything that they measure is how does it relate to the top line of the business, right? So the revenue stream, how does it relate to the bottom line of the business, right? Which is the profit, right? So that vulnerability or weakness has to relate to them in some degree or mannerism, right? So if you're talking about brand, got to bring that brand back somehow. Is that going to cause it some type of fines, right? Impact to the business, or hey, look, if you do this stuff, you're going to look really, really good. You'll be able to prove it to your customers. It's going to reduce contracting friction, right? You'll be able to win more work. It'll be a sales differentiator, right? I'll tell you what, CEOs, salespeople, they fucking love that stuff when I talk to them about, hey, this pen testing report is not going to be just a report about your vulnerabilities and weaknesses. This is going to serve as a sales differentiator to help you win more work, right? And they're like, hell yeah, that's what I want, right? So that's just an important item for people to be considerate of when we talk about general mistakes that are made, that kind of stuff. Any other big questions or concerns so far? No? Okay. So, one of the things that I don't think I have to really say here, but I will say is a general mistake for Kiana to track here is uh, not asking for help or being abrasive when asking for help, right? So you guys all seem like great folks, and the fact that you're here now is absolutely awesome, right? There are a lot of times where someone will keep beating their head against the wall, right? They don't ask for help. They don't ask for tricks or reaching out, that kind of stuff. One of the things that I think is really, really cool, particularly like Travis does a lot of outreach in the community. I know that Kiana does a little bit. Lou on our team also does a little bit, but is reaching out to other people and giving them tips, and then also asking for information too, right? So that's always really, really important to do. Also, to that context, when we talk about social media, right? So we're going to get down below as you guys start to see like a resume example, right? That looks really fucking fantastic. And I'll talk about why it's so cool. But not just focusing on your resume. Yes, unfortunately, writing resumes really sucks ass. Okay. Uh, we all know that. And also, too, when I go to hire people, I know I'm not hiring professional resume writers or professional interviewers. I'm hiring a cybersecurity engineer. So I always do try to keep in mind that if the resume doesn't look perfect, or the person is stuttering a little bit, or they're a little bit taken back because they're being put under pressure, it's fine. It's understandable, right? But I'll tell you what, if the experience is a little bit more polished with your resume and a little bit more polished with the interview process, it's going to make it much, much easier for them to just say, you know what, I want to hire you immediately, rather than give us a couple of days to think about it. So that next tip is, or mistake that I commonly see, is people neglecting their LinkedIn profile, right? Making sure that every job that you have, right, has bullet points that go back to like something that's relevant for your career. Even if you were doing a service industry job, it's important, right? Service industry jobs teach you a lot of things, right? Around character building, how to manage tough customers and tough situations, how to communicate, how to manage competing priorities at once. Those are things that people in the service industry face, right? If you said, hey, I worked at McDonald's as a manager, or I worked at McDonald's as a fry cook, right? And it taught me how to manage competing priorities and how to communicate in high intensity environments. Somebody go, holy shit, you learned a lot from McDonald's, right? And you can take even the most, like, what seems like a degrading plebeian type of position, which I'm not saying it is, but this is how a lot of people usually talk as an executive. If you're able to extrapolate that type of insight from a low position, what if you're put into a great position, right, where you're able to be successful? What type of insight can you extract? What type of great stuff can you do, right? So definitely don't neglect your LinkedIn profile. Don't neglect your previous positions and describing what you learned from those positions, what you did, what you were responsible for in those positions, right? To that, continuing on here, I do think that while people should not be driven by certifications purely, I do think it is good for people to have I'd say 80% of people need to have some type of certification or career track, right? So neglecting to have some type of learning path that incorporates certifications, or degrees or boot camps, right? Or just general milestone goals, even if you're learning on your own, right? Hey, I want to learn in 6 months from now wireless pen testing. And then 3 months after that, I want to learn about IoT pen testing. And then another 3 months after that, I want to learn about physical pen testing, right? And then 3 months after that, I want to learn about how to do dynamic application security testing, right? Setting a learning path for yourself and having goals, right? To shoot for. Usually having those tied to certifications or learning paths or degrees is helpful. I'm not somebody who judges someone on their certifications. Somebody could walk right in the door, has 0 certifications, and if they could talk the talk and walk the walk, great. But I know a lot of you folks here, right, come from a background where you're getting into cybersecurity as a new thing, right? So being able to talk the talk and walk the walk is not something that's native. You got to have a learning track for it, right? So any other questions or concerns so far? No? Okay, super. I will compliment that last note about when someone doesn't have a learning path, um, someone will develop a learning path, they'll follow the certifications, but they're doing the certifications for just the certification's sake, just for the paper's sake, right? So when you are learning, you should be trying to genuinely focus on learning and understanding the why, which means this: if it takes you longer to get a certification because you're trying to understand the why behind something rather than just doing monkey see, monkey do, or repeating back definitions, right? It's going to be probably a little bit more worth it, right? The reason being is this: the pieces of paper are going to help assist you on your resume a little bit and getting in front of an initial interviewer. But once you get in front of an initial interviewer, they're going to throw a lot of questions at you. And if you don't understand the why behind things and the critical thought processes behind those things, they're going to be unimpressed. They're going to wonder, how did you get that certification? They're going to just think that you learned it all up real quick, did the cert, and then purged the knowledge out of your head, right? Rather, if you happen to get an interview with somebody and you don't have all those certs, but you're talking as if you do because you understand the why, so maybe you're still in progress of getting the certificate, they'll be more impressed, right? You exceeded their expectations then, right? So to that, those are some of the general mistakes that I've seen. Let's talk about some tips. So some good tips are this. So there's this great resume builder right here that I used in the past, right, called Visual CV. I recommend that most people investigate or utilize Visual CV because we're not professional designers or resume writers, that kind of stuff, right? But having something that's that pops out a little bit and is easy on the eyes. There's 2 types of people that you're going to really interface with usually in your interview process. So you're going to have basically an HR person who doesn't understand anything about technology whatsoever. They're going to be keywording. They're going to look at how pretty your resume is, how clean it is, what's the grammar and the spelling, right? And are they seeing words that happen to line up with the words that were listed in the position, right? Oh, I see SQL. I see SQL. I see pen testing. I see pen testing. Oh, I see they got they have a certification, and we said that it requires a certification, right? So that's your first layer that you have to get through is human resources, right? Layperson human resources. So when you have something that is kind of pretty like this, that has like a picture of you and that kind of stuff, it does come off as a very personal experience, especially, by the way, post-COVID, right? Previous to COVID, like having your like face on a resume might be a little bit weird, right? But now most cybersecurity positions can be done remotely, right? So having your face on it, right, makes it more personal and engaging, and human resources people really, really love that stuff. So even though I know most cybersecurity people really, really hate it and it's kind of tacky, but that being noted, when you go to build out your resume, by the way, certainly keeping it to nice, easy bullet points, keeping it readable, right? Just like how they have this template here. I think Visual CV costs something like, it's like $15 a quarter or something like that, right? It's really inexpensive as a solution, as a tool, right? But anyways, so this is a resume of a gentleman that I actually had the opportunity of interviewing with recently. This was actually one of the folks who is a competitor against Dennis here, right? By the way, if you guys haven't noticed already, as an executive of an organization, I'm a fairly transparent, not no bullshit type of person, right? So, I don't find this to be strange at all or anything like that, talking about these things. But anyways, this gentleman had a fantastic resume. I thought it was really well lined out, right? Actually, better than Dennis's. But Dennis could talk the talk and walk the walk a lot better, right? And so Dennis, while his resume came in as less technically impressive on paper, once we sat down with him and spoke with him, right, going through the technical exercises in the technical interview, he easily exceeded that expectation, which is why, we hired him compared to this one right here. So this guy did a great job on his resume. His technical skills weren't as up to snuff as he led to believe, right? This is the type of person who's likely maybe more of a career type of certification go-getter type of person, right? This person, the majority of their, you could say I've redacted this, by the way, the majority of their background is associated with doing a lot of federal government work, right? Not to like rag on federal government or anything like that, but the quality of federal government is, they're not as competitive sometimes for certain things. So that being noted, so this really stood out as unique and interesting. Again, person had their picture, fantastic, really awesome there, right? And then they went with embracing a particular caricature about them, which is what? That everyone in cybersecurity and IT must be a nerd and nerd looking, that kind of stuff, right? The reason why I got my crazy hair and I got my mustache like this and all that kind of stuff is part of a caricature, right? I have a lot of fun with it. I enjoy it, right? I'm a chameleon, right? But I do it because it makes the customers enjoy it and it's funny and it's a great icebreaker, right? So certainly that's what this person did from a psychological perspective in their resume, right? So I would usually recommend something that stands out. This is perhaps a little bit gaudy, but it's still not too bad, right? Now, one of the things I was really impressed with, and this is going to be, I would say that this would be a really cool thing to do. So HR person sees your resume. They like the nice big smiling face on there, all that kind of stuff. They see all the keywords and are impressed by it. They pass it over to the real hiring manager. Usually it's going to be some cybersecurity engineer who knows what the fuck he's actually talking about. And if you have something like this here, what is that? Does anyone know what that is right there at the bottom? No?
Rot 13, maybe?
Holy shit. Well, I think you heard me mention it, right? It is right.
No, I just looked at it.
so it's ROT 13, right? But it's a cipher. It's just ciphered information, right? And so it's really not that complex for most cybersecurity folks, especially like somebody who's like intermediate to seniority level, right? But when you put in like little things like that, right? It is unique and interesting. So this person's message was basically, if you can read this, you can hire me, right? As a little bit of a challenge, right? It's fun and engaging and interesting. Other engineers like that type of shit, right? So if you wanted to add just a little pizzazz to your resume, right? Putting in a little cipher message at the bottom or something like that is kind of cool, right? And then they list out their certifications at the end and all that kind of stuff. So very, very nice. So again, well laid out. They played to a particular caricature. They kept it nice and personal, right? Again, they had tons of certifications on paper. It was like all day long certifications. They, certainly contained the alphabet many, many times after their name, which is awesome for them, but their technical skills just weren't up to par for what we needed at the time. So to that, any questions or concerns in regards to resume building tips or anything like that? No? I got one more for you.
Yeah, so I have one comment regarding the certs. So it's not unheard of people cheating. And I think there was like a company, a pretty well-known company that was caught having basically like test dumps in there, distributing test dumps to their employees so they could pass some of these.
Well, it's gone way beyond that, Andres. There's a RDP out there too as well, remote desktop, where people will log into your computer for you and take the test if you choose the at-home version, and it's all over LinkedIn right now. So many messages about all that crap.
Yeah, a lot of spam on that.
Yep.
Actually, get this shit. So I was just talking to one of my friends. He's a CISO for a Fortune 50 company. And he was telling me that he got some candidates that when they get on camera and all that kind of stuff, right? The person who was on camera doing the interview, right, was completely different than the person who showed up walking through the fucking doors, right, 2 weeks later, right? So there are not just people who are taking, cheating on exams, right, or taking exams on other people's behalf, but also conducting interviews on other people's behalfs, right? And then when they walk through the fucking door, it's like, who the fuck are you? Why is it that you have amnesia, right? What is going on here, right? And they've seen, I think, like something like 30% of their interviews are now like that, right? It is really unfortunate. It's really crazy. So that's why, again, it's important more than ever that when you apply for a position, applying for relevant positions, always being personal with whoever you're interfacing with. I would also tend to write so you can have a cover letter template, but have a cover letter template and statement, right? Put the person's actual name in there. Hey, I attest that I, will be a valuable asset to your organization if I attain the position of blah, 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 and then continue on from there, right? Maybe actually a little bit later, I will throw in my old cover letter as an example for you guys to see how over the top and desperate it was, but it has a lot of good language in that regard. The fact of the matter, though, is that those are going to be little things that are likely to get you in front of people rather than a shotgun approach. I've always found that quality very much more trumps quantity when it comes to interviews. So one last cool tip here. And I generally say this for anyone who is at least going for pen testing. Most folks here, my understanding, have an interest in pen testing primarily, right? Do a pen test and produce your own pen testing report. Put it on your GitHub and then link it in your resume. Here's a sample report that I created on my own pen test, right? That is something that's going to really impress an engineer, right? When they take a look at your report, they're going to go, wow, that's a sample work reference. That'll even impress a human resources person because they're like, oh, look, they attached their sample work references. That's very nice of them. Now, something that would be a controversial thing is if you were a joker like me and you think you could get away with it, putting in a canary token in your Word or in your PDF report on your GitHub page. So every time someone visits it, you get a notification about it, right? And a really good cybersecurity engineer will see that and they'll usually have a really good laugh and they're like, okay, you're hired instantly. I love it, right? And so I did have a couple people in my interview process that they so Blake, my chief customer officer, was reaching out to people and interfacing with them, right? And I had a couple people, they actually directly reached out to me and they scheduled a meeting with me because they actually found my HubSpot meeting link, right? So they did open source intelligence gathering or reconnaissance on me. They found my meeting link, right? And then scheduled the meeting directly with me going outside of Blake, right? I found that absolutely fucking hilarious and awesome, right? And those are types of individuals where it's a plus a point, Obviously, though, we're a small business, right? So just for everyone's kind of context here, we're a small business of right now about 10 full-time employees. The culture is a bit different here, right? So being playful and that kind of stuff is encouraged, right? If you're probably trying to get hired by JP Morgan, which I don't recommend you would ever fucking apply to JP Morgan, probably don't want to try to pull that shit, right? I would also generally note, right? I interface with a lot of people, right? Across a lot of different business sizes and enterprises, that kind of stuff, right? So the Rolodex of CISOs that I interface with that are multi-billion-dollar hedge funds, multi-billion-dollar insurance companies, multi-billion-dollar banks, Fortune 500 companies, got tons of them. What I will say is generally this, is that if you are one who is perfectly fine with bureaucracy, politics, and bullshit, right, then it's perfectly fine to, go work for a really, 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 really large enterprise, right? But my recommendation is focus again on quality. So if you're looking to be a pen tester, right now, I don't have any open positions. Otherwise, I would let you guys know and I let you guys bid for it and all that kind of stuff, right? Sorry, Dennis took all the good stuff. Blame him, okay? But anyways, fact of the matter is that there are tons of other small cybersecurity firms that are really, really nice, right? That you should reach out to, right? So like, for example, one of my competitors I'm really proud of, right? Trellabits, right? Actually, they're probably one of the few firms I consider like better than us, right? When it comes to quality and expertise, right? I think they're probably the only one, right? And then there are a couple of them that are like, all right, like Red Team Security, Praetorian, SBI, they're all right folks and that kind of stuff, right? Like I find that like those are companies that I could as competitors, refer other people to and say, hey, you know what, this competitor's going to do all right. You know, like they're not going to be as awesome as me, but they'll take care of you, right? And then there's just tons of slag and shit like Rapid7, where it's like, don't touch that garbage, right? Like that's just gross, right? Why would you do that? You're just burning your money away. You know what I mean? So I would tend to avoid, again, large, gargantuan beasts of organizations like that. So to that, I think we had a lot of good tips back and forth, that kind of stuff. So I'm going to open up to Travis and Kiana for a couple moments. If you guys want to introduce any additional tips and tricks, and then we'll do some interview questions, right? And kind of be able to mock a little bit of an interview process with people. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, so I haven't done as many interviews on your side of the table in the cybersecurity space, but one of my roles in the military was as a cyber and electronic warfare officer for a time, and it was a very understrength branch, so practically nobody was actually trained to do it, myself included. So it was pretty much a volunteer thing, and then they had to interview into work in that particular section. So I did a lot of interviews with different folks on that. And one of the things that I saw so often, and I don't know if that's a pure military culture of it, or if people are just like this, but when you're asked a question in an interview and you get one right, they'll progressively get a little challenging because the interviewer is trying to gauge where your actual skill and expertise is, right? So you will get to a point where you don't know the answer to a question. And I always found it when I was interviewing people and doing these boards, much more, I don't know if endearing is the right word, but it made me like them better if they could be honest and let me and tell me that, you know, hey, I don't know the answer to that. This is what I would do to find that information. You know, this is where I would look. I'd be happy to get back to you with a recommendation for how to approach that. That is a way better answer than somebody just swinging for the fences and giving me a bunch of incorrect stuff very confidently. Because if they do that in the interview and they're way off, but they're like so sure about it and they really stick to their guns on being wrong, how can I have the faith and confidence that when I ask them a question when I really need that information, that they're going to be honest and truthful if they've got it or they don't?
That's a really fantastic point you make there. I don't think actually, at least in my last round of interviews, I don't think I had anyone ever say to me when they didn't know the answer, you know, I don't know the answer to that, but as a resourceful person, this is how I go find that answer. Here are some of the steps I go to find that answer, right? And if I heard that type of stuff more often from people, that would really impress me. I am always happy when someone just tells me, "Hey, I don't know that answer. I'm sorry, man. I'm not going to bullshit you there." That's great too. I always appreciate when people don't bullshit me. But if someone says, this is how I go about finding the answer," that's really cool. So
Yeah.
good tip there.
Yeah, if someone asks you a question on how to enumerate ESXi and you don't know, you're like, hey, Carlos does. I'll look at hack tricks. I'll send you the link.
Hell yeah.
That's the one major one that came to mind. I don't know if you have any other tips specifically about the verbal interviewing process. A lot of this was about the resume and getting in front of people. Or Kiana, do you have anything from any of the folks that you've dealt with?
I didn't do as much interviewing as you did, but I would say the same thing as Travis. Like honesty was always appreciated, at least when I was working with folks who were not familiar with a lot of the jobs that they did in the military. So.
Cool. Andres, was there anything you'd want to add?
Yeah, so I guess I have a comment and a question. So I recently just transitioned roles. So I was working for a water company in the blue team role, and I switched to a red team role within the last couple of weeks. So I did a number of interviews during that time, and I've had some bad experience. So like Christian mentioned, some people are kind of assholes. I remember one point, I told the person, hey, I'm willing to take this much money, which was a 20K pay cut. And he like verbally laughed at me. I was like, okay, wow, that's a kick in the gut. So, you know, obviously I didn't take the job. They didn't offer me. It was just a bad experience. But I held out, and eventually, you know, I got a job and I was earning what I asked for. So you'll get at times like that, and you just gotta pick yourself back up and keep at it. And they weren't all bad, but that was just one that I remember. It was pretty upsetting. And then there's other times where you'll have to go through a bunch of hoops. So multiple interviews, pre-interview questions. I actually had one where a company made you do a challenge. So when you completed that challenge, you had an email address you could send your resume through. Once you did that, they sent you some more challenges. So one challenge was a coding challenge. Another one was a reporting, I think I remember. And they made you jump through a lot of hoops. So that's something that happens pretty often. And when you're doing that, you know, you're little. I guess you want to do it, but at the same time, you kind of have to evaluate that. Like, is this really a company you want to work for? They're making you do all these things. It's probably some company that's gonna have a lot of red tape. And do you really want to work for them? So that's something that you should consider. Um, but eventually, you'll find someone that's a good fit that you'll be able to get in with. Um, and like the resumes that you show, those are actually pretty interesting. That's something I wish I had done better, is produced a more, I guess, eye-catching resume. So that was a good tip that I liked.
Well, thanks, man. Very fantastic information and insight there. 100% you're correct. I like, by the way, you bringing up the fact of companies having people jump through hoops. So actually, for Dennis and for our recent interview process, we tried to balance that. So we had a couple of challenging pre-interview questions. It was just like Blake was like, "Hey, can you just answer these whenever you got a moment?" And we'll get 15 minutes on the calendar. And then after that initial interview, it was usually the first interview was just kind of like character reference, like just saying like if the person's a nice person, do they reference, are they easy to interface with? Do they seem like they'd be a good team player? Do they seem like they are able to kind of collect their thoughts together well, that kind of stuff. And then usually after that, we would set up a technical interview where we would bring in Shane, my CTO, who is like 10 times more intelligent than myself when it comes to engineering. And he would, really kind of hit people with a lot of specific technical questions and hypothetical exercises to just kind of see, right? And the whole point of that exercise was to just like test the limits of what someone's knowledge was. I will say there was times where I think maybe Shane was a little bit too multi-tiered in some of his questions. It's like sometimes when someone asks a question, there's like 5 parts to it, and you're like, okay, cool, but like that wasn't one question. That was 5 fucking questions, dude. You're being an asshole. So we could have did a little bit better on that. But one of the last elements of the exercise that we did, and it was a recent thing that we developed that I thought was cool, was Shane built his own custom vulnerable web application or website, right? And then we would have people try to break into it, right, and get a shell to it, right? And if they were able to do that, right, basically, depending on what they found, they got a score, right? And I remember, Dennis, we turned it over to you, right? I think it was in your second interview, right? Like right on the interview with you, right? And then it was only a couple hours later, you ripped through it, and you're like, okay, done. I got access to it, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, yeah, it was exactly that. I was handed it over by Shane. I did CTFs, so I had some experience messing and tampering with things. But Shane handed it over to me, sat down and took a look at it, and got through it pretty quick. And I think a lot of that is contributed to probably CTF. That being said, there was a reasonable time frame. I think if it wasn't me, I think others, if they had the technical knowledge, I think they could have probably got through it within that time fairly easily.
Yeah. So we should have made it a little bit more challenging. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I get to help design them now, so
Right? Well, one of the things that we'll have to get your feedback on soon is how we can improve our interview process and that kind of stuff, because nothing is ever perfect. So he's going to be able to help improve it, guys, by improving the challenge lab. So hopefully we'll get to disseminate that to people in the future, open source community and whatnot, and other companies can use that. So that's a cool.
That'll be cool.
There.
Hey, Michael, do you want to talk anything about all the hoops? I know every interview you've had has seemed to have a hoop. And by the way, the vulnerable web app that Shane makes is way better than that broken shitty one that you got handed last week.
Oh yeah, no, I've well, I mean, just a little backstory about me. I've been put through the ringer the last 3 weeks, to say the least. My LinkedIn's finally taken off. I've had about 16 interviews within the last 3 weeks. Made it to the technical rounds. Six out of all of them right now, and I've got a couple of ones that we're scheduling. But with DEF CON going on, and my team is competing in the CTF this week as well, so Dennis, I'm on Team Samurai. I don't know if you know that or not with DEF CON. I know you play a lot of CTFs, so with Chris Eagle and those guys. So hello. Yeah, the hoops are crazy, right? And Travis and I have actually tried to dissect this shitty web app that I was given. It's interesting. It's the hoops are crazy. I've went through my one interview now with a company that I'm not going to name, but I'm on the fourth interview now with the third challenge as well. So these things tend to happen, I guess, when you are entry level and your only experience is CTFs, and you throw your hack in the box in there, your try hack maze. I send write-ups all the time to my recruiters. Travis and I have talked about the actual tip you gave, which I always do the same thing. My recruiters, if I don't know the answer, I say, I don't know, but if you'd like me to share my screen, I can walk you through how I would find the answer with Google Dorking and things of that nature, so you can get like a thought process of how I do it. But no, I'm hoop guy right now, man. And Travis knows he's actually seen them and played with the apps with me, because the one company that I was rejected with was kind enough to keep access for me with a RSA key. So I have it for an entire year to play with and to try to break and things of that. So they said, hey, keep it and use it as work experience. So I said, okay, that's cool of you guys, because it's a fake app, it's a fake company. So I sent it out to all my interviews, as well as some CTF write-ups like Pico, Hackasat, DEF CON challenges, all those things. But yeah, the hoops are crazy.
Yeah, and a little off topic, but earlier Christian mentioned, some of the big names that you would apply for, like Rapid7. So, my last job, we had several assessments done. So we had one by Mandiant. So I think a lot of you probably know Mandiant. We spent a lot of money with Mandiant.
Bet you
And
did.
that report, it was okay. I mean, it was okay, but it was nowhere as good as a smaller company that we hired somewhere out Dallas. They wrecked us. I mean, they put us to shame whenever they did our assessment. So, you don't, just going with a big name like that, you're not guaranteed a great report.
Yeah, no, and I've learned the lesson that I'm the smaller mom and pop companies are definitely where I should be at to hone my skills, to get some really good on the job training and things of that nature. These big companies, the hoop jumping is insane. Comfortably enough, I know that I bombed the interview with Leviathan Security. I can drop that name, and that was after the fifth interview with them, and the tech lead just did not like my code auditing skills, which are pretty much not there at the moment. I'm still learning. I can do bash scripting, Python scripting, but I can't write sophisticated code. I can look at it and see what it's attempting to do, but my weakness right now is code auditing, and that's what I'm trying to fix. But all these places that say we're hiring for network pen testers, they all give you web app security tests. So,
Yeah, I know that. Just as a side note, by the way, Travis, can you provide Mike my meeting link for later? Mike, I would love the opportunity, because we haven't had the ability to interface that much before. I'd love the opportunity to interface with you a little bit more and pick your brain just for opportunities and synergy for down the line. I don't have any positions right now or anything like that, but you seem like a fantastic individual to know for at least the future. So
yeah, no worries. Thanks, appreciate it.
yeah, not a problem. So in regards to hoop jumping, one last story here. I'll make it quick because I know we're supposed to get into more interview questions. KPMG. I remember I was going to do a position for KPMG of Director of IT Infrastructure. And I will tell you what, I had to do about 4 interviews. In the last interview, they had me go into their offices, and they had me sit down for an entire day doing sets of interviews with about 12 individuals. And getting up and drawing diagrams on the board and all that kind of stuff. And they said to me, you're going to be putting a lot of time and after hours on this, all that kind of stuff, and blah, 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 blah. And, at the time I was like, it's all about the money. I want the money. Right. So it was like a position. It was like about 300K. Right. And so I get the hiring paperwork, right? I get the hiring paperwork, and it starts to ask me for like latitude and longitudinal coordinates of my family members and whatnot. And I was like, okay, fuck this shit. Fuck this shit. Why was I doing this? I'm absolutely nuts. No. So yeah, luckily I didn't do that. Otherwise I'd probably be dead today. So let's do this. Let's jump into some fun questions here. So some of you guys are probably already really well aware of these. Some of the other folks might not be. So I think that for like folks like probably Mike and Dennis and Andreas, right? You guys have heard a lot of these before, right? But for some of the other folks, at least try to set you up a little bit more for success and that kind of stuff. And first and foremost, a fundamental question, and it should really be asked of everybody, is what's the difference between symmetric and asymmetric encryption, right? You should be able to explain that on the fly very quickly and easily, and what the differences are and which one's obviously better, right? You should also be able to explain the difference between ciphering something, encrypting something, and hashing something. Those are all different mathematical operations used for different types of things that have different purposes, right? And sometimes you can tell when someone slips up and they don't understand something well, they'll say encrypt the password. You go, you don't want to encrypt the password. That's a bad fucking idea, my man. You want to hash that password, and you want to salt that password on top of that, my man. Right? So just little notes like that. Okay. So very important one. Understanding what public key cryptography is also alongside that, right? That gets back to asymmetric encryption. If you don't understand what public key cryptography is, or what public key infrastructure is, that's going to be something to look at the guides, actually understand the why behind it, and that kind of stuff, because it's a fundamental underpinning of so many elements of cybersecurity, right? Another important question that I tend to ask people in that process is what mutual TLS is. Now, even though mutual TLS sometimes comes off as a new technology to people and that kind of stuff, that terminology in itself, somebody should, even if they're not familiar with it, logically be able to figure it is just by that term, right? Mutual TLS. Well, it has to be on both sides, right? So there has to be certificates on both sides, right, for that TLS connection to be fully trusted and to be fully encrypted, right? Now, one may ask themselves, well, why would you do that? Because it's not about the encryption at that point. It's actually about the trust, right? Proving who you are, right? So the proof there. So if you're, again, that's a fundamental question that we tend to ask people. Any questions or concerns so far? No? Okay, super. So again, these are also a little bit more specific to web stuff, because this is what we were doing as of late. But this is, again, just a standard cybersecurity question. Understanding, can you tell me the difference between SAST and DAST? Does anyone know what the difference between SAST and DAST is here? I'm going to presume we got a couple of folks. Dennis has got the shit-eating grin on his face. Of course he does. Does anyone else? Yeah, Andreas is okay. Mike?
Yes. SAS scans application code, and DAS tests like the running application code. So it's kind of like along the lines of well, to be fair, it's like taking the GUI of Zap, but like making it into its own its own thing. You can actually like cut it right through in half. So SAST and DAS is like that. It's basically code versus running code is like the bare bones answer of it.
Pretty good, not too bad. What I'll tend to also ask people after that is, okay, well, if that's what SAS does, what does source code composition analysis do, or SCA? How is SCA different than SAST? Anyone got a good answer to that one?
Fucking crickets here, bro. That's a good one.
Dennis?
You know, I'd hate to answer when everybody else has an opportunity.
Come on, man.
Oh gosh, off the top of my head, off the top of my head, to be entirely honest with you, I'm not familiar with the term. I'm sure I probably can imagine what it is.
Nope.
Okay, I can take a guess. I can throw a shot in the dark. I would guess source code composition analysis. I assume is the quality of the code and is not necessarily the security of the code. That would be my guess.
Ah, shit, man. Sorry. Yeah. That's code linting, my man.
Code linting. Yeah, all right, well, throw it at me for me.
So my guess would be third-party libraries.
There you go, my man. So the thing is, so when you do SAS analysis, you're looking for vulnerabilities and weaknesses that are within the code that somebody has written, right? Dynamic application security testing is when the application is in runtime, right? Which is a completely different state, right? Because obviously everything's in memory, right? So like Michael was noting, like Zap, that kind of stuff, is inherently a DAST tool, right? So when we talk about also things like web app pen testing, right, that has a lot of DAST components to it. It's not that it can't ever have any SaaS component to it, but usually it's going to be DAST, right? A SaaS component might be you take the web app JavaScript, right, that is loaded in your web browser and you analyze it for hard-coded API keys, right? I found a hard-coded API key. That's some type of SaaS technique that you just utilized and leveraged, right? And then source code composition analysis is exactly to what Andres was saying. The libraries and the dependencies you're using, but not just because they're out of date. What about all those fucking malicious ones like NPM typo squatting packages, right? Like all the time now, what malicious actors are doing is they're performing supply chain attacks, right? And they'll write out a dependency that has a very similar name to another dependency. It's actually on PyPy or NPM, that kind of stuff. You accidentally import it in your code base. Now your application's running it, right? Now it makes a callback and dumps all the secrets out of your app, or that kind of stuff, right? Really, really terrible shit, right? So source code composition analysis is not going to help you just hunt down all of those ancient libraries that have tons of different vulnerabilities and weaknesses associated to them, but also the malicious ones too, right? So not just having a SaaS tool, but having SCA is going to be important, and then obviously your DAST components. Now, by the way, we got about 4 minutes left here, plus or minus, right? This has been a fantastic conversation so far. It sounds like we'll probably have to pick up a little bit more in the near future. How many more minutes should we go on beyond? Or should we just stop at 10 hard?
You can go another 10, 15 minutes if you want, and there's no shame if anyone needs to jump off. I know my wife's
Yeah.
gonna be freaking out at me at about 9:15 Central, so that'll be when I leave.
Okay.
Yeah, so I could keep going, and I have one of those coding challenges I can show you if y'all wanted to look at one of those.
Oh, hell yeah. One of the things that Travis and I were talking about, so you guys are seeing us, like, so I shared down this Notion page, right, for the resume and interviewing tips and that kind of stuff, right? And last week I did the one with the IoT pen testing. So our hope is that we're going to regiment these a little bit more where, one, people could share good resources amongst one another. We'll try to curate the resources into a nice library, not just have it be a shit post fest, but curate it really nicely. So yes, definitely Mike, Andreas, send stuff like that our way. And then also letting other folks, right? Like Andreas, you did a really good session on Azure pen testing and whatnot, letting other people do presentations, trying to give them a format and that kind of stuff to kind of frame and leverage and utilize for the future. This way it scales beyond, just beyond Travis and myself, right? Gives everyone the opportunity to learn and grow. And then also, even for some people who don't present a lot, that gives you the opportunity of presenting in front of other people who understand, they respect you and that kind of stuff, right? So it gives you the ability to build up your presentation skills and your confidence, that kind of stuff, right? So that's a really important element for everyone that I think have. So anyways, then continuing on here, one of the things that I will tend to ask somebody in a web pen testing position is I'll ask them, tell me what a JWT is when it comes to authentication and authorization. Now, Dennis is very familiar with those at this juncture. I presume that Andreas and Michael are as well. Anyone else familiar with JWTs quite yet? No? Now, one of the things I'll very frequently hear, so when someone repeats back the acronym, they'll say Java Web Token. It's not Java, JSON. They meant JSON Web Token, right? And then something I very frequently will misspeak on is I'll sometimes say encrypted JWT, which I meant to actually say a JWE, right? So a JWE is usually a signed and encrypted payload, right, with your JSON web token, right? So that's just an important note there, especially because a lot of applications are transferring from a conventional authentication architecture that is leveraging things like cookies, right, into leveraging JWTs, which inherently don't require you to track the sessions on the server side anymore. And actually, I think there's a really cool video that I'll disseminate after the fact for folks who are looking to get more into web pen testing, because I never really understood what the big differences were between leveraging regular conventional tokens and session cookies versus JWTs, right? One requires actually the server to validate on the back end every single time, the former, right? While the latter is actually a cryptographic proof, right, that the server just inherently trusts you, right? Which is from a performance standpoint scales extremely well, but also at the same time has its own inherent vulnerabilities and weaknesses, especially if whatever's encrypting those JWEs, right, is a really, really weak secret, right? But anyways, that's all aside of the matter. So another good thing I'll ask somebody is, what is fuzzing when it comes to web pen testing? Anyone familiar with fuzzing here? Yeah? Dennis, why don't you tell everyone what fuzzing is?
Fuzzing, for those who aren't familiar, is the process of running automated tools in an attempt to, I guess, either inject commands into certain endpoints of a web application. So certain fields, for instance, like first name, last name, things like that you have access to, or alternatively discovering things that were not meant to be seen. For instance, directories that are not meant to be exposed to the public, things like that.
Okay, cool beans.
Yeah, there's an awesome misconception about with the fuzzing and everything else. Like, you have your Buster, Go Buster, Feral Buster is a new hotness right now. It's so fast. And then fuzzing, it's just a lot of people correlate the same, directory busting, fuzzing, and it's an interesting conversation, especially from a recruiter standpoint when they ask that question, because I straight ahead and I go straight to Dirtbuster, Go Buster, Feral Buster, because it's like network pens in my wheelhouse, right? But fuzzing, it's as simple as bare bones. It's like changing one little piece of information over and over and over and over again to stress the application out, and that's what's cool about it, I think. But fuzzing is definitely something that I'm trying to work on. It's not my wheelhouse at the moment, but directory busting is.
Yeah, URL fuzzing is definitely the most common way that you see it when you're looking at just different like materials to pick up pen testing. It's one of the classic ones that's all over the place. But yeah, you can fuzz all kinds of stuff beyond just URLs.
Fantastic. So another great question I'll tend to ask people is, why are VLANs important when it comes to network security? What are the core functions and purpose of VLANs when it comes to security? Has anyone got a good answer for that one? How about we try, why don't we try one of the newer folks here? Brandon, you always have really fantastic answers, I hear. Oh, no, you're still muted.
You just missed all the genius. I can't recreate it. So why are VLANs important? Virtual local area networks. Honestly, couldn't give you a great answer right now, but I will find out.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Not a problem. How about you got any other new folks that might be able to provide me a good one? No. Michael, I'll put you on the spot. I'm interested in hearing more answers from you.
Your boy has an associate's in network infrastructure with Cisco products. So VLANs,
Me too.
I always joke that VLANs are like the router subnets, right? So like you want to have separate VLANs so you can put people in separate groups for security wise. That way, if like some sort of malware or ransomware or something hits that part of the VLAN, it's not going to hit any other parts of that area as well. And in a security sense, that's the easiest bare bones answer that I can give. I'm sure there are other highly intelligent answers out there that I am unaware of, but it's been a hot minute since I've played with anything network in terms of Cisco products, setting up VLANs, things of that nature, subnets. But that's where I would go with it. It separates everybody from different groups, different users, and it protects the network from not letting something get out to a different VLAN or a different subnet for that matter.
Fantastic.
Hey, Christian, can I chime in?
Hell yeah, Bob. You're always welcome to chime in.
Yeah, I want to just piggyback on that. What I think it was Michael's. Yeah, to me, when you have the VLANs, then that really helps you with ACLs too. If you want to, you take maybe a lower trust zone and a higher trust zone. You could, if you know that everything's on a certain VLAN and they all have a certain kind of purpose or security value, it makes it easier, I feel, when you're, let's say, building up ACLs or firewall rules compared to, this host and that host. So I think that helps. Also, I would say when you have VLANs, I think when you reduce the broadcasting, I think there's some value there. I'm always a little bit worried about things like let's say ARP, so on, if be less likely to be impacted by things like ARP spoofing if you have more VLANs. And so those are a few things I wanted to contribute to the conversation. I don't know what you think about that, Christian, but.
That was really good, man. That was awesome. Thank you for laying that on us. Yes, absolutely fantastic. And even, by the way, right, beyond even Bob's point a little bit there, let's say you had a bunch of VLANs across your network and you didn't have any access control lists in place or anything like that, but you have an intrusion prevention system in place, right? Intrusion prevention systems are only as good as where they're actually installed and where they're doing work, right? If you have a workstation and a server on the same VLAN and same subnet, they're talking to one another directly, right? You can purchase the most expensive Cisco IPS ever, right? Ain't gonna do shit for you, right? But at least, again, even if you didn't have any ACLs, you have a workstation VLAN and subnet, and you have a server VLAN and subnet. Once it goes through the inter-VLAN routing system, right? So the local router or firewall that has the intrusion prevention module on it, then it's going to be able to actually analyze that traffic and see if there's anything sus going on there. So the amount of times that I've actually been blocked by an IPS trying to do internal pivoting on the network has been fairly significant, right? Where like I'm like, oh, look, I can do a Cisco smart install attack and take over this switch, this catalyst switch over here, right? And I go to execute it, right? This remote command execution attack payload then gets detected, right? By the intrusion prevention system, blocks it for me, and I can't move any further. What a pain in my ass, right? While I absolutely love it when I enter into a network that's almost completely flat topology because I don't have to worry about any of those controls in place getting in my way. Not to mention, on top of that, right, they're not going to get any notifications about it, at least not at the network level, right? Assuming you're not doing something goofy like port scanning for some reason, the gateway IP. Don't ever do that. That's a day one stuff, bro. So very fantastic, very awesome there. And then also Bob bringing up ARP cache poisoning and ARP spoofing attacks, right? As well as doing things like DHCP rogue server attacks, right? That's another one that's really, really important at the local VLAN level, right? And then also other types of broadcast traffic like that sneaky ass net BIOS and link local multicast name resolution, which happens all the time.
Pick up every time.
Gets you every time. It's the most classic way to do lateral movement in a Windows environment is to grab that MBNS traffic and just reply back out on the Windows file server. Give me those sweet NTLM hashes. So to that, pretty good on time here. We're about 7 minutes over. So let's do this. Let's disseminate out. We have our feedback form, right? So let me grab that. We'll throw that back in the chat here. You guys can tell us how terrible we're doing, all that kind of stuff. Give us tips on how to improve and also content that you guys want to hear more about in the future. If you want to present your own content, if you want to add to more content, right? This is all, again, open source, all like all free and whatnot. So Mike, just for your own consideration and knowledge here, right? While I am, again, the Chief Operating Officer and Chief Information Security Officer, one of the owners of Go Vanguard, this is not a boot camp sponsored by Go Vanguard, documentation sponsored by Go Vanguard. No, I don't give a fuck about Go Vanguard.
You mean you're not going to have Boyd Lewis come here and try to offer me 6 figures for a $15,000 boot camp? No.
I was about to say, where's my fucking Go Vanguard badge? It's not supposed to be on my shirt and all that kind of stuff, right? So that being said, so I just dropped the form in the chat for everybody. So whatever we're doing here today and in the future, so you guys can continue to invite more folks to join and whatnot. As there are new folks that join us, we'll just briefly have folks introduce themselves and that kind of stuff. So we'll have to kind of work out a nicer process for that. I know it's kind of a little bit unstructured in that regard. And then what we'll also do is we'll start to come up with a process of creating an agenda of, look, this is what the next couple kind of weeks look like. These are the things we're going to be covering. So people know when to join, when not to join, because there may be stuff that's relevant to them, stuff that they've already heard about, they don't really give a fuck about. Or somebody wants to present their own stuff or add more into it, great, right? On GitHub right now, we have a bunch of like open source resources about basically like awesome pen test tools and all that kind of stuff that's been like super aggregated together. Likely, I know this sounds very, very newish of me. You guys have seen the page I dropped in the chat today, but also the one from last week on the IoT pen testing. we are big fans of Notion right now. It is all in Markdown, so it can be put on GitHub very nicely too, right? I like open stuff, right? But it presents really, really nicely. It's really, really easy to edit and for people to kind of leverage like database information from like a database perspective. So we're going to likely sync all these things still to GitHub and that kind of stuff, but have probably public Notion pages for them, right? This way, it's very easy on the eyes for someone to go through like, hey, I got a huge list of pen test tools, and I want to sort these pen test tools into a list of, I want to see just the pen test tools that are associated with this particular meter attack framework item, or this very specific OWASP web security testing guide item or section, right? And then they filter to those tools, and it just shows just those tools, right? So Travis will work on more initiatives like that in the near future. So those are just some things that kind of come down the line for you guys, okay? Okay, so to that, any last items before we jump off here, team?
So do we have time for me to run through that coding challenge, that one interview I had me asked?
Yeah, here we share it out real quick. We'll start to take a look. So yeah.
So let me know when you can see it.
Yep, gotcha.
Okay, good man.
Okay, so this was one of the positions I applied for. So like I was mentioning earlier, they ask you to go through a bunch of hoops. So in this case, they said go through this coding challenge. So the challenge was to build a program that sorts IPs from a file, and then just sort them, and then print it out to the screen. So this is the example they gave. So what I decided to do is CISA puts out information, indicators of compromise. So in this case, this was a advisory about North Korea. So these IPs were associated to North Korea during one of the attacks or campaigns that they had. So I grabbed this, and as you can see, it's in different order. And I just wrote a little program in Python. So there's a function here that reads the file, a function that then sorts it, and then the main function, and then this is what calls the main function. So when you run the program, I'm not going to specify a file. And when you do that, you see here it's telling you, hey, you made a mistake. The correct usage is run the program and then specify a file. So I'll do the file next. So I'll just put IP list and then run it. And this time when we look at it, the file or the IP addresses should be sorted. So these are some of the things that they may ask you to do. So I think it's advantageous to at least have an understanding of Python. I think it's helpful, and this isn't perfect. I didn't do any error handling, so right here I noted, hey, add method for sorting IPv6 addresses. So that's something that while it's not in there, they can see, hey, he's going to work on that. So that just, I've been on at least 2 occasions where I've been asked to write something like that. So just as a heads up.
That's fantastic, man. Thank you for showing us this. This is really awesome. That was also a really great tip that you provided, which is anyone who's going for any web stuff, right? And even in some circumstances with network stuff, you're going to be asked coding challenges. If you do not understand Python, you will not be able to do web pen testing, period. And fact of the matter is if you really, really suck at Bash scripting, and you really suck at PowerShell, and you really suck at Python scripting, right? You're going to still have a tough time as a network pen tester because there are so many things that you can make your life easier with, right? If you don't understand how to like pipe something and grep it and whatnot, right? To make yourself like your life a little bit easier, you will find yourself spending tons and tons of time on tedious things, trying to sort data, right? Trying to filter the information you want, right? So understanding little tips and tricks of actually navigating around Bash, right? Actually knowing how you leverage Python, keyboard shortcuts, obviously, right? Navigating in text editors like Vim, right? Not just Nano.
Yeah, Nano.
And Nano's a little bit too easy. Vim, believe it or not, has, again, a lot of features and functionality that allows you to do things at scale, right? Those are going to be things that if someone picks up, it's going to make them much more powerful. I will have one just last note to Andreas here, which is, it reminds me of one time I had a coding challenge that was presented to me, and it was, people always love doing sorting stuff, right? And so I purposely wrote the application with an algorithm called worst sort. right? It's the slowest sorting algorithm that you can ever utilize, right? Purposely, right? And I did it as a joke. And then what I also did, it was at that time, I was I did a lot of programming in like C and C++ and C#, right? And so I wrote it all in one line with semicolons too, to make it as unreadable as possible as a joke. I didn't get the job.
Should have used inline assembly. That was what got you.
Who hurt you?
So, team, any other good items before we jump off here?
Say, hey Andres, I really appreciate it when you didn't put in the file. It actually told you what the syntax was. Because I don't know if anyone's used the new version of Hashcat, but 3 of us spent like 3 hours today trying to troubleshoot that thing that kept telling us we had no RAM, when really what it meant was syntax error. So
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
yeah,
Error handling, really important one.
really important.
Okay, then team, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. Travis and myself will take a look at all your guys' form submissions over the next couple days, and we'll start planning out a more codified agenda for the future Wednesday sessions. And as always, feel free to invite other hardworking and enthusiastic people who are looking to learn more about cybersecurity. Okay?
Cool.
Have a
Thank
great
you.
All right. Take care, everyone.
Have a good night.
Hey guys.
Thank you.
Take care.